Hey everyone, and welcome to the Season 2 debut of Might I Add, where we talk, you guessed it, all things UCF sports. I'm your host, Partain, and we've got a lot in store for you today. I'm talking college football bowl season. We're going to recap the past month of college football's postseason. And who else would be here but our very own Jeremy Brener? He's going to help us sort all this out, and there's a lot to talk about. Jeremy, how you doing, man?
JB, can't think of a better way than to start the season.
That's how we like to think.
It's like peanut butter and jelly.
That's what I'm saying. It's just a natural flow here, folks. That's how it goes on Might I Add. We're going to start it off with one of our best here, and we're going to kick things off the way we usually do. That's our very own UCF Knights. UCF was able to take part in the Bad Boy Mowers Gasparilla Bowl out in Tampa, which was technically a de facto home game for the Knights. The opponent, it was none other than old-time Conference USA rival Marshall. UCF ended up blowing by those guys 48-25, and the game truly never felt close. But the major story from this one was the defense, which wasn't contrary to the Knights all season. The Knights came away with 5 total turnovers in that game, and 2 of those were returned for scores. Jeremy, what did the UCF defense do so well?
They were playmakers, and like you mentioned, the offense is the one with the playmakers. But this time the defense kind of took some pressure off of that offense and decided to make some plays of their own, which is what you want to see. And I think it was just kind of like a thank you to the offense, because the offense kept them in a lot of games this season in which they probably shouldn't have even been in. And the defense was like, you know what, offense, thank you for all your hard work. We're going to get you right here in the bowl game, and we're going to go and help you get this win. And I think the defense, was the reason why this team ended up getting that W.
And it's interesting because we've seen the defense time and time again this season's been very undisciplined. And, it showed. It was a chippy game, especially in the second half. So what are your thoughts on where that defense, this mindset of the defense, needs to take that next step and develop?
It's definitely a step in the right direction. However, there's a lot of guys that aren't going to be there come 2020. Talking Nate Evans, Neville Clark, Richie Grant, all of them probably moving on. So there's going to have to be, and it was similar to how it was from the 2018 to 2019 shift, where you needed to find new playmakers. And I think you found that this season. There were guys that stepped up. Kenny Tunye on the defensive line really stepped up. Eric Gilliard had some big plays in the linebacker core. He stepped up as a leader. And you had Tay Gowan, who's fortunately coming back for 2020. So there were new playmakers that stepped in, but as it is in college football programs are factories, and you have to, guys are only there for so long. It's not like the NFL where you can stay there 10 years and you got your guy, your cornerstone for a decade. You got 4 years with these guys. So if you just got to keep churning out new, better prospects. And I think that UCF showed in the bowl game that they have players that can be part of the solution in 2020, and that's a step in the right direction.
And it's going to need to be a major step in the right direction, not only for the defense, but we're talking offense as well. In the game against Marshall, true freshman Dillon Gabriel started at quarterback for the Knights once again, and he showed just why his potential is seemingly limitless. DG threw for 260 yards and 2 touchdowns in less than stellar weather conditions in that game. And these kinds of performances really make you wonder, what's the future look like for this kid?
I think, honestly, Dillon Gabriel was put in a position where he was expected to do a lot more than he probably was capable of. And, that's just what happens when you, supplant Mackenzie Milton, who, was the guy for UCF, probably arguably the best quarterback in UCF history. I mean,
arguably, though.
That's a story for another day.
Absolutely.
But Dillon Gabriel walked in with enormous expectations a true freshman should not garner in their first season. However, I think what we saw from Dillon Gabriel in Gasparilla Bowl was very similar to what we saw most of the season. You saw flashes of brilliance, flashes of, a top 5 quarterback in the country, but we also saw signs of a true freshman. And that's just the roller coaster ride that Dillon Gabriel has been in 2019. And similarly, I think, if you look at Dillon Gabriel's freshman season and you look at Mackenzie Milton's freshman season, I got to say, Dillon Gabriel's freshman season probably stands alone as a better season overall than what Mackenzie Milton had in his freshman season. And if we saw a better freshman season from Dillon Gabriel, the ceiling might be even higher than what Mackenzie had. And that's pretty impressive.
It's kind of scary to think about because you're right. KZ had a very, very average, freshman year. But real quickly, before we move on from UCF, I want to know what you think about UCF's season in general. Was it a success? Was it a flop?
Obviously, it was a step behind, but also when you go 12-0, there's only one way to go, and it's down. Obviously, 9-3, they only lost 3 games by less than a score each time. So, this season obviously is not what UCF fans wanted, but at the end of the day, many programs around the country would be pretty thrilled about a 10-win season, and I think that UCF fans should be pleased with the 10-win season. Not thrilled, because obviously you had something. You could have won those 3 games, and you could have gotten that New Year's Six Bowl again. But pleased is what the word I would use to describe.
Yeah, it's hard to be upset with 3 10-win seasons in a row, and UCF is building something here, folks. This was always about making sure that DG could step into the role that Casey has left. All right, so moving on from UCF, they were one of just 7 teams from the American Athletic Conference to take part in the postseason. The conference, however, posted just a measly 4-3 record in those games. Not really what you want to do when you're pushing for a Power 6 brand. However, there were some big wins, and there were also several teams that kind of fell in the bright lights. So, Jeremy, who do you think was the biggest disappointment of all of the teams in the conference?
We talked about this before the show, and I was I was talking about Temple and how they had lost UNC, but UNC's got something real strong going, and that's going to be a fun game when they come here in Orlando in 2020 to start the season. However, SMU, they were a top 15 team for at one point this season, and they go against FAU, and they can't get it done. I mean, look, and this is no slight to FAU. FAU's a really good football team, but so is SMU. They should have won that game, and it's just unfortunate because they were going on such a high. They were building something real strong, but then it kind of just fell apart.
And it is kind of interesting. Since that game against Memphis, after they lost to Memphis, it truly felt like it was a tale of 2 seasons, and SMU could not figure out how to regain momentum and rebuild and rebound from a struggle and adversity. And it really showed against FAU, who was good, not great. SMU had the talent and everything, should have easily won that game. They didn't. And that's how it goes in college football postseason. But we'll go on the other end of the spectrum for the American Athletic Conference. Several teams picked up big wins instead of losing, and they capped off their season in a very successful way. And maybe no team in the conference did that more successfully and looked more impressive than the Cincinnati Bearcats. Cincinnati took on Boston College in the Birmingham Bowl and obliterated them 38-6. So what did Cincinnati do right to stop Boston College's effective rushing attack?
They just stopped the run. And that's what happens when you have one-dimensional offenses. And look, Boston College, great running team. But when you eliminate that, when you limit that, it's hard for those kind of teams to score points. And you have to exploit their strengths, kind of. And that's simply what Cincinnati did. Props to the Bearcats. That's what I can say. But I want to say, like, Memphis going into that, yes, they lost, but Memphis going into the New Year's Six Bowl, it's always great when you're conference, when you are a group of 5 conference, when you get that New Year's Six Bowl, that's obviously impressive. And although Memphis didn't win, I think they held their own. They had a real tough matchup. They had the toughest matchup of anyone in the American, but they held their own. And I think that that's all you can really ask for when you have your group of 5 team go in, play a really good Power 5 team. It isn't just a Power 5 team; it's one of the best. The team that
Penn
goes
State's
in the
a good
Year
team.
6. Exactly, yeah. Penn State. There was some arguments that they could have been in the top 4 had 1 or 2 games gone their way, but I think that once again, the American is proving themselves to be the Power 6, and that's what you want when you're in a conference like that.
And that's a great point, great transition from Jeremy here, folks. Because before we move on from the American, I was going to talk about how this Power 6 brand has kind of surfaced in the American Athletic Conference. And with this bowl season, some highs, some lows, varying levels of success, I'm kind of curious, Jeremy, what your thoughts on the perspective of this conference is right now?
I think that the SMU loss obviously hurts. However, UCF got the job done. Cincinnati got the job done. Memphis respectfully did their part as the group of 5 representative. And hopefully we get back to 2020 and we have yet again where the group of 5 championship, the American championship, is the team that ends up going to play in that New Year's Six Bowl. Hopefully it's UCF. I would love to see that again. But I think all you can do is just visibility and competition. And I think that we had 1.4 teams in the top 25 at one point this year. I mean, look, bowl season is weird because it doesn't exactly reflect what is the full season. But I think I don't think you can say that this bowl season was a failure. I wouldn't say it was a huge, radiant success, but I do believe that there were some positives, negatives, and at the end of the day, is it really going to matter too much in the grand scheme of things? I don't think so.
Yeah, and again, before we move on, that's a great point. And I also want to give a quick shout out to Navy with their big-time win, 2017 over Kansas State. Now, while there are several games in the American Athletic Conference this postseason that were entertaining, bowl season as a whole kind of came and went without too much noise. Now, there weren't a ton of memorable games, but a handful will be remembered by fans that don't belong to their respective teams. And of that handful, there were several great ones. You talk about Michigan State's back-and-forth game against Wake Forest to that all-time classic Fiesta Bowl between Clemson and Ohio State. There were several of those games, aside from those two, that truly delivered as well. So, Jeremy, of all the bowl games this season, which one kind of stood out to you the most?
So, obviously, we're taking away the Fiesta Bowl. I think that's everybody's number one. I don't think that you can really argue against that. However, the game that I enjoyed the most this entire season was the Hawaii Bowl. BYU versus Hawaii in Hawaii. It was on Christmas Eve, half-empty stadium, but it delivered. There were several lead changes in the fourth quarter. Hawaii's quarterback got them down the field, and it was just a beautiful game to watch. There was so much back and forth. But also, I know it's not necessarily bowl season, and I know you're not going to like this answer, but James Madison in North Dakota State delivered at the end. It delivered at the end, and that interception at the end, I called it. I called the interception at the end. My roommates are my witnesses, and I called it. It was football is football at the end of the day. I don't care. Exciting football, and especially if it's for a championship. It was a championship football at its finest, and it was such an exciting finish. I recommend you to look at your phone and just, if the score is close, turn it on.
I'll have to find that one. And what I'd love to see is for North Dakota State to just get into the FBS.
I think we're a couple years away.
A couple years away, but again, that's not a bad take. It's not my favorite.
8 championships in 9 years. Not many teams can say that.
That's impressive. But that wraps up our recap of college football's bowl season. However, this spring, it brings a whole lot of new sports with it. UCF men's and women's basketball teams are in the early stages of conference play, and track and field for UCF also began their season over the weekend. And this week brings just a few games for all you UCF fans out there. The men's basketball team is going to play at Tulane on Tuesday before returning to take on the USF Bulls on Saturday. And the women's basketball team is going to host the one and only UConn on Thursday before heading out to Tampa to also play USF on Sunday. And that wraps up everything here. Thank you, Jeremy. Always a pleasure to have you out here.
KPJB, peanut butter and jelly.
And thank you to everyone for tuning in to the Season 2 debut of Might I Add. It's going to be a great season, and there's a lot in store for everyone this season, so be sure to stay tuned every week. Be sure to tune in on Mondays at noon for the one and only Jarrett Kappelman, and he can take you through all our sports content. And, of course, you don't want to forget our HTF podcasts that go out weekly. Be sure to follow us on social media at Hitting the Field. Thanks, everyone. Thanks again for tuning in. I'm Kyle Partain. He's Jeremy Brener, and we'll catch you next week on Might I Add.